He's given us a thumbs up. Very much looking forward to this. On Sunday, March 23rd, live from the Vale Pavilion, it's the Benefit for Bey. Very excited now to welcome to the show, FSW Zone, Joe. Joe, do you use your last name publicly? I want to make sure before I...
Yeah, Joe DeFalco.
Joe DeFalco. How are you doing this afternoon? Or morning?
Woke up a little early, but I'm good to go because, we're on the West Coast and we're just trying to get the word out to as much as possible. One of the local television stations, Fox 5, we were fortunate that somebody who works there is a huge wrestling fan. So he reached out and they did an interview with Chris for about 30 minutes at the facility yesterday. They talked to me for a couple. And that's going to air Saturday night on their sports wrap-up right before the show Sunday. They're also going to be there with a full crew on Sunday filming stuff. So what started out as something that, hey, I wanted to do this for Chris, who's been one of our best students, a guy who made it and wasn't like looking for that payday afterwards. It was like he was very respectful and thankful of what we did for him, and he was always there for us. So I felt this was the best opportunity to be there for him.
We're putting together a fantastic show and, really aligning the wrestling world. And I know since Chris Bey's injury, which happened in October, like the wrestling world has come together. And it always sucks that it takes events like this for everybody to come together. But he's been giving shout outs on WWE TV, AEW TV. And now we got on this show, we got Karrion Kross, we got Swerve Strickland, we got Ricochet from WWE and AEW. What's it been like just putting this card together?
Well, it's funny because, we knew people and I knew people who happen to know Chris. And like back in the day, guys like John Morrison and Brian Cage, they were big fans of Chris and really pushed to get him signed in TNA back in the day. And we ended up forming a relationship when TNA came out here, when Jeff Jarrett and Sanjay Dutt were basically running TNA or Impact. And Sanjay stayed pretty close all the time. And I always tell the story that when Sanjay went to WWE, that's how Chris got signed in TNA, because they needed a match at a WWE 205 or something. And Sanjay saw Chris and he's like, hey, put Chris in there against Arya Daivari. And then literally after the match, 2 days later, TNA reached out and offered Chris the contract. And that bond and that relationship and everything putting together, and that's how crazy it is with the wrestling world, got Chris signed in TNA because Sanjay was in WWE. And then when this was getting started, I reached out to guys like John and Brian, because I still talk to them on a once in a while basis, and said we were trying to put this together. And Morrison was like, put me down, I want to be involved. And as I said, I thought it was going to be like, hey, Ace Austin will come out, Trey Miguel. We were going to do it at the FSW facility. We figured we'd get a couple hundred people there, raise a few dollars. It'll be cool. But then Kross wanted to get involved. And thankfully, WWE is very slow in getting things moving, that we couldn't do the show at the end of January when we thought about it. So now we moved it to March. And then all of a sudden, the floodgates opened and people are reaching out. And I even hit up Sanjay, who now works in AEW. And I had already gotten Morrison and Cage. He's like, hey, you want me to reach out to those guys? And I'm like, no, Sanjay, I got it. I said, but I'd love if you could reach out to Strickland, because Shane was the guy when I was doing shows in Phoenix. It was called the IWF, and the budget at the time was unlimited. And all these guys who were working PWG, Ricochet, Strickland, Chris Hero, all these guys I was using on a show in Phoenix, Arizona. Nobody in the world knew who they were. Ricochet and Swan worked FSW once against the Reno Scub. Nobody knew who these guys were. So I stayed in somewhat contact. Ricochet moved out here. He would come by the gym and use the facility. So conversations were had. And as we were doing the thing with Kross, all of a sudden the wrestling world reaches out. Sanjay, I said, hey, if you can get Strickland. Literally the next day, Shane Strickland hit me up without even talking to Sanjay, because he wanted to be a part of this. And then it was the Rascals, obviously, and Ace Austin. And then Rich Swann reaches out. And then, I talked to Rhino. And it was like, all of a sudden it's like a who's who of the wrestling community. And then Brian Cage is like, hey, Melissa Santos, my wife would like to ring announce. It's like, okay. And then we got Sean T, who is the Revolver ring announcer guy, and he happens to live in Vegas. And then Justin Borden, who we used in the old IWF shows with Rick Knox, reaches out. And I'm like, Justin, love to have you. He does the New Japan. 2 hours later, Justin hits me up. Hey, Rick Knox wants to ref too. Is that cool? I'm like, who wouldn't want Rick Knox on your wrestling show? And it was just like, so we got ring announcers, we got referees, we got everybody who wants to be a part of this. And, you know, AJ Francis is going to come on in to be in a battle royal. It's like there's going to be a 20 or 30 man battle royal, depending on, you know, some of Chris's friends or people he helped train or did seminars with that he grew close to and helped out are coming in on their own dime just for the little bit of being in a battle royal, just because they want to honor Chris.
So this is always interesting to me because, you know, you're talking about all this talent wanting to come in and wanting to give back and wanting to help out with Chris and everything that he's been through. Typically, when you're doing a tribute show, a benefit show, something like that, matchmaking almost becomes up to the wrestlers. Is there anyone you want to work with? Was that the case here, or was this you're pitching like, I think maybe this would be the match for you? Like, what was that effort kind of looking like?
Initially, it was like, man, I could throw a dart, and I said I could write up 100 cards, and every card is going to be like, wow, this is great. These are great matches. These are great matches. And I'm like, before anything, Kenny King, who's one of my trainers, you know, hey man, I want to work Swerve. I'm like, you're ghosting me. I'm like, dude, I'm not ghosting you. I'm doing a million things. I said, right now, putting the card together wasn't like the number one priority. It's finding out everybody who we're going to have first, Kenny. It's like, I haven't even got to that part of the card. So then like a week later, Swerve hits me up. He's like, hey, who do you got me working? I said, well, we haven't put it together yet, but Kenny was interested in wanting to work you. He's like, oh, Kenny would be great. Okay, well, why would I go against that? These guys are doing it. So at that point, I'm talking to Cage. And in my mind, I'm like, you know, I know Cage always likes working a little smaller guys on independence because he wants to go. That's what Cage does compared to AEW. Like, he wants to do the cool matches. So it's like, so in my mind, I'm like, hey, Rich Swann, Leo Rush, you know, those would be really good options. Rich Swann would be a number one option for me. I'm like, hey, Brian, you know, I'm trying to put together the card. Who do you think you'd want to work on this show? He goes, hey, Rich Swann would be really cool. So it's like, well, like minds think alike. So now we got a couple of matches. I posted about John Morrison. Ace Austin had the bug eyes. Oh, I'd love to work John Morrison. So, okay. And then it's like, well, we wanted a third guy. And then I sat with Chris Bey. And initially we had Leo Rush going in the match with like Danny Limelight and Frankie Kazarian and Ice Williams. And he liked Leo in the three-way. So we moved it to that. And now it kind of like the card built itself in that manner. Obviously, we had the tag teams with the Rascals, and we were going to do, you know, a regular tag, but makeshift chemistry, two young kids who are my tag team champions who have been helping Chris because Chris's girlfriend, Brittany, comes down and trains, and Chris has been helping her. And that's how we saw Chris a lot more. He's been coming down to the school, and they've been helping him. So he was excited of the idea of Makeshift actually having a match, even though they're 22, 23-year-old kids on this mega card instead of it just being in the Battle Royal. So it's just like keeping everybody happy, Chris's ideas and stuff, my ideas and stuff. And basically that's how the card gets built. And then Cross, we had talked about numerous names. Rhino was an option initially. Then I reached out to Kevin and like, I've always wanted to see Cross and Matt Cardona. And Cross is like, oh, you want me to have Matt? I'm like, you know, it's a benefit show. It's not my job or responsibility to be like, hey, you want to come and do a show for free? That has to be up to the wrestlers. I can't ask somebody to work a show and then say, oh, yeah, by the way, I'm not paying you. Are you cool with that? I want people who want to be there, who know what this is. If they want to be a part of it, they're going to reach out. Cardona like Cage has to go to Australia. But Matt had a show in Wisconsin the day before the 22nd, which means he would have to come to Vegas the 23rd to go back to Florida the 24th to go to Australia. So that kind of didn't work out. And Hammerstone had been hurt. And for any FSW fans know, Cross, Hammerstone, and Chris Bey are the three greatest FSW champions ever. And they all intertwined, not for like a year or so, but for like 5 or 6 years. Those three guys were the main events of our shows, you know. And when I reached out to Hammerstone, the date became open, and he was 1,000% behind it, because those three guys have also been guys that have always gone out of their way and showed extreme loyalty to the company and appreciated everything that I kind of did for them early in their careers.
So you touched on it a little bit. I'd like to get a little bit more insight. And my second part of the question, if you can't spoil it, completely understand. Like, how involved was Chris in putting things together? And will Chris be at the show and make an appearance?
Good question. So initially, when we planned on doing it in January, there was no thought in my head about Chris, because he had not progressed at all at that point. At the end, he didn't come back to Vegas till almost Christmas time. And at that point, there had been very little progress. So in the January show, my thought process was Chris was probably not going to be there. But then miraculously over that next month, the progress had been tremendous. So when we were talking now in January, the idea of Chris being at the show was like 90%. But yes, Chris will be at the show. You know, spoiler alert, we're going to probably not have him come out till, you know, late, probably the main event, after the main event, possibly. But yeah, Chris 100% is going to be behind it. I reached out to Chris, hey, give me your thoughts on the stuff. So Chris had some ideas about the Battle Royal. Chris had some ideas about putting different people in different spots. So I wouldn't say he had a ton, but he definitely was involved in some of those matches that you're going to see are because of Chris Bey ideas. And Chris has always been that guy. You know, I like to say, if Chris didn't have a show, Indies or TNA, a lot of times you'd see him backstage at our school student shows and our regular high octane type shows that have, you know, the regular main roster. And Chris would be there critiquing, and Chris would be there, you know, talking. Chris would be there agenting matches. So Chris was always a hands-on guy in terms of giving back. And the fact that he loves wrestling so much, if he wasn't at a show, he was at our show. And Chris wouldn't be like, hey, am I getting paid for this? Or, you know, if I needed him to do color commentary, great. If we had a casino show coming up that Chris was going to be on, he'd get on the microphone and cut a promo. Chris was never, hey, you know, I need a little extra cash for this. Like, money was never really even discussed with Chris. You know, when you start out, you're not being paid. And then all of a sudden you're getting some money and you're not paying dues anymore. And it would just slowly come up. And he's like, hey, you know, hey, what can you do for this show? I'm like, hey, I can do this. He understood it was a school show. So Chris has always been, you know, whatever I can do for him, awesome. And if I couldn't, awesome. It didn't stop him from being there. So, you know, being involved with something Chris has done since pretty much day one. Kenny King trains a class on Wednesday. Kenny has other obligations and stuff. So Kenny's usually good for like 2 out of every 4 Wednesdays. And Chris would hit me up. Hey, is Kenny going to be in today? Is Kenny going to be in today? And if Kenny wasn't going to be in, or some other trainer wasn't going to be in, you know, Chris became like that designated hitter. So it would be like he would come in every other Wednesday or third Tuesday and help train class because he just wanted to be a part of it. Yesterday we did the interview, and all of a sudden I saw Brittany, and it was like an hour and a half later. I'm like, oh, you guys are still here? And they're like, yeah, Chris was working with Sin Bodhi and helping run the class, because that's Chris.
You mentioned, we're working with talent from a bunch of different companies, contracted talent in many cases. That experience has got to be a lot to deal with. You talk about WWE kind of getting to you a little bit later and moving the show, a little bit down the road, which seems to be actually of benefit because now Chris is hopefully going to be able to be a part of it. Now, with that in mind, what was that experience like working with WWE and just kind of all getting on the same page to do something that they typically don't do with their talent?
Well, it's interesting because we've been involved a lot with the ID program and Gabe Sapolsky, and I've been dealing with him for years. So I know Gabe, and he'd come by the shows, and, he did a seminar a couple of years ago where, in most cases he's charging $100, but he knows a lot of our guys. Solo Sikoa trained with us. We trained him, Zoe Stark, Karrion Kross. So he was fully aware of us. So then Gabe decided to get more involved and do the ID stuff. So he asked us if we wanted to be a part of it. So I had dealt with them in a capacity, but now I had to deal with, first it was the medical and the HR, and it became indie wrestling. You can't really afford all the time to have paramedics and ambulances on duty and all that other stuff. So that became a major prerequisite to have Kross on the show. So I had to guarantee them we would have the 2 paramedics and an ambulance on site. Then once we got through that approval, then it became HR, and it had to deal with creative. It had to deal with, a bunch of little things that the paperwork had to get signed off on. Okay, now we got to go to Hunter, and he's got to approve that. Because Kross was so much behind this, he was a major influence. So it was around Christmas time, and it was like, okay, it's now New Year's. It's a week or so. I haven't heard anything from him for like 10 days. And then it was like sending another message, figure we're going to give everybody the holidays off. And then it was another week. So I reached out to Kevin. And then literally 2 hours later, I got an email finally back after 3 weeks from these guys. And, oh, sorry for the delay, blah, blah. And as Kevin said, they don't want to hear it from the wrestlers, because then if the wrestlers go to Nick Khan or Triple H, then all of a sudden, they might be in trouble. So since Kevin reached out, that kind of fast-tracked everything. And finally, after about 6 weeks, we finally got the paperwork, and then it was all done. And then I saw on it, I had to sign it, DocuSign, and then Nick Khan had to sign it, and that would make it official. So now it's 5 days later. It's like, hey, guys, we're trying to announce Kross for the show. Oh, yeah, Nick signed it. It's all good. And it was like, well, thanks for getting back to me. So it's like, that process, because I guess there's so many people involved in everything, it kind of took forever. We're actually waiting on 2 more WWE superstars that are expected to be at the show. Female talent that reached out. And also Rey Mysterio was going to work the show, which was crazy to me because he wanted to work. And he was trying to tag team with TJ Wilson, who hasn't wrestled in forever. And Kevin reached out, and it was like, TJ was like, oh, yeah, don't worry about it. I just won't do any high-flying stuff. I would just do mat stuff. So he was talking about tag teaming with Rey Mysterio to wrestle Dominic and Kross in the main event. But that became, hold on, we have the European tour, and that kind of put the kibosh in that. I think Bey was talking to CM Punk yesterday, and Punk was like, man, if we weren't on this tour, I would have worked the show. And it's like, well, if somebody would have told us, I would have moved it a week later.
No, because then they would have been like, WrestleMania is coming. We got to keep everyone fresh.
Right. Oh, man. Hearing that, I know TJ and Natalia have talked very highly of Chris Bey and wanting to work with him. So it doesn't surprise me at all that if they could do it, they would try to be part of that.
Right, because if we had TJ, then Natty would have worked.
Yeah. So that doesn't surprise me at all that they would try to be part of that. That's amazing. You mentioned WWE ID and FSW is hosting some WWE ID championship tournament matches as part of WrestleMania weekend. What has that relationship been like? And there's been a lot of stuff about the WWE ID program and working with promoters. So how's it been from your side of things?
Well, the minute I heard about it, I thought, hey, they got about 18 guys and girls on the ID program. 2 of them are ours. So none of the other schools that are ID schools, and I hit up Gabe. I was a little disappointed. It was like, because he had mentioned some stuff that's coming up in the future. So it's like, well, it'll be nice for us to be a WWE ID school. It'll help with, you would think, where people who want to train may want to help my business, which is cool because in the ID program, nobody's paying me to have these matches. I have to, pay. But Ice Williams is an ID guy who's been my champion forever, and he's been with me forever. So he's always going to be on the shows. So Gabe reached out, and the first match we did was one of the first ones, other than the Evolve one, was Jack Cartwheel versus Ice Williams. And we had to negotiate the rate because I'm like, how does this work? Am I paying for this? He's like, no, they'll cover the travel. You just have to figure out, what's a fair price. And I knew Jack from working a Future Legend tournament that we had, and I've used Jack in the past, and he had a rate, and I saw him, and his rate was X amount of dollars. So it's like, okay, well, this is a school show. I'm not really going to pay him that. And it's like, and he asked, that was the rate he asked if I would pay. And I'm like, well, nah, it's a school show, but Gabe wants this match. So it's their job to make it work. So we paid Jack what we felt was a fair price for a school show, what I would pay somebody of his talent that was coming in, the Danny Limelights of the world and the Hammerstones and all those guys, work for me at a certain price. So it's like, I never want to pay somebody who I feel hasn't done as much for FSW as a Hammerstone, a Chris Bey, a Danny Limelight, that I'm going to pay somebody else just to work my show. And if they're cool with it, great. And if they're not, sorry, no harm, no foul. So I hit up about being the ID school, and they presented the idea of, well, right now it's the Rikishi school, and it's Cody Rhodes' school, and it's Seth Rollins' school, which is kind of a beginner school. It's only a 12-week program. It's like, well, what about us? And, we're lurking, but this is part of what we hope. They say, hey, being FSW a part of the ID school is a big thing, and maybe we should have them in. And I actually gave Gabe the idea. I'm like, hey, what do you think Mania Week? There's a lot going on. And I said, what if we did an ID only show? He's like, hey, that's a good idea. So Gabe always likes good ideas, just like we're doing the training camp and seminar with Gabe WrestleMania week, because I pitched him to him. Because I'm always trying to come up with ideas that are creative, and everybody needs to make a few dollars here and there. So, plus it gets us noticed. And that's the number one key, because we're never going to make enough money, but getting on that radar and having FSW elevated. So when you go on Twitter and you go on Instagram, now all these people seem to know who FSW is. And the name Future Stars of Wrestling that people used to like laugh at, like, oh, well, they're not really stars. They're future stars. Why does anybody want to watch? But everybody that's come through our program, now that name is synonymous with everything. And it's like, wow, that's a really good name. Which I used to fight with people in the beginning. It was like, oh, that's a stupid name. So hopefully it helps our brand get bigger. And working with Gabe, the ID guys are great. We brought in Marcus Mathers and Sam Holloway, and this is what I can afford to pay on have a show. Okay, we're there. So, and now these guys work for us at other times. So they're okay with it. There's certain people that are going to pay way more money, and everybody's going to work those shows, of course, but there's always value in working for FSW for them. So I'll get them at a better price, and it works for everybody. And hopefully the relationship grows to where when you see FSW, it says WWE ID School.
So Joe, before I let you go, I have a very important question. You're a Vegas guy. You know Vegas well. How are you? Do you know the restaurants in Vegas very well?
Yeah, mostly the ones that you'd want to know about, because the strip restaurants,
So
I don't make that kind of money to where I'm going to eat the same steak for $400 instead of $150.
so this is the problem. We're trying to figure out what 5-star restaurant on the Las Vegas Strip is hosting the John Cena lunch for $25,000.
I saw that yesterday, and it was like, but you got to remember that they're limiting it to only 20 people.
Oh, we get it. It's more, what is the 5-star restaurant? Because they're not going to tell you until you book it, and it's probably going to be
right.
bus.
We did something similar back in the day. Casa di Amore is one of the best Italian restaurants in Las Vegas. And when I had Matt Hardy in, we did a dinner with Matt Hardy. And instead of charging $25,000, we charged $150. So, and
much more reasonable.
Yeah, and it was a great time. So for $25,000, man, I'll tell you what, that's going to be extremely interesting to see, because it is Vegas and it's people coming in for Mania, and it's going to probably be sold out.
5-star restaurant on the Strip. We got to figure out what it is.
Yeah, I thought you were going to ask me for some advice on, like, hey, where can we eat really good for not crazy prices?
That's a question for next time. But for now, we're talking about the show. It's going to be Sunday. Right. It's March.
If I find out, I'll make a surprise call in and let you know.
I love it. Listen, the link, it's always the same link. So if you get it, just pop onto the show. We're live 10 a.m. till noon Eastern every day. So,
you mean I could just pop in any day I want?
Listen, yes, literally, you can. The link does not change. Click that link anytime from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern, and you're more than welcome to join us.
Well, I'm going to hit up some of my wrestlers, and I'm going to say, hey, just hit this link, and you can just pitch the show.
Do it, please. Honestly,
yeah, why not? Give us
all more than welcome to join.
Yeah, give us
or what I could do is I can go on the Twitter and post the link, and then you can have all these crazy wrestling fans.
Then we will have to change the link.
Change the link. But the show it's Sunday. It's March 23rd. Future Stars of Wrestling are going to have the Benefit for Bay at the Vail Pavilion. WWE's Karrion Kross is going to be there. AEW is going to have Shane Strickland, John Morrison, Brian Cage, Lio Rush, TNA's The Rascals, Ace Austin will be there, Frankie Kazarian, Rhino, Rich Swann, AJ Francis we know is going to be in that Battle Royal. Melissa Santos is going to be there as well. A lot of stars all coming together. It's a Benefit for Bay. You can watch it on Triller TV. I will say now that our Super Chats on Friday on this show, all of the Super Chats that we get, that's our fan donations, will be going towards the Chris Bey GoFundMe. I wanted people to know that right now. And Joe, before we let you go, is there anything else you want to plug ahead of this show?
Yeah, we have a donation account that's local from Nevada State Bank, where people in Vegas. But also what we're doing is, we want to raise as much as we can. So instead of going to the GoFundMe, we want it to be the biggest check we can do. So we have, Venmo's FSW09. We got my email address, LVFuturestars@yahoo.com for the Zelle. CashApp is the $ FSW09. And if you send it to that way we can combine everything. We've had donations. The Cauliflower Alley Club's donating $2,500 to Chris, as well as, shockingly, the Nevada State Assembly Speaker, Steve Yeager, not the catcher from the Dodgers back in the day, but he found out about the show and he goes, hey, I'd like to help out. Can I donate $2,500? And it's like, absolutely, which is basically covering most of the flights that I have to cover for the guys that are coming in. So it's like almost all the money that's going to be generated from the box office, the show's already going to be paid off by then. So we're hoping to raise a minimum of $25,000 at least for Chris. So
we can send the Super Chats through Venmo if that's easier.
Yeah, that would be great, because that way it would be like, hey, this is what's happened through our show, and do that, and I can, if you want, on the Twitter or on the account, I could send you that information, because I know I posted it on the Twitter page yesterday. Yeah,
I saw it on the Twitter page, and we'll make sure to add that to our description on Friday's show and today's show as well, so that way people can donate. But yes, all the Super Chats from Friday's show, we'll send that over after Friday's show.
Fantastic. We also got that trading card, that Raw Deal Indie card that's like $15 a piece. People are buying that. We're going to also have the 11x17 poster. That the one that you see is great, but Mikey, our graphics guys, got to add, Hammerstone and Ricochet and Sin Bodhi and hopefully the other 2 WWE superstars. So the poster will literally have everybody on it. So it's going to be, fantastic. We're looking forward to it. This is the real Forbidden Door. It's the only show in the world that has every single major company represented. So it's great.
It's amazing. We're looking forward to it on Sunday. Go watch it on Triller. If you can still get tickets and you're in the Vegas area or surrounding, go to the show.
Yeah, first and second row are already sold out. We added a third row and then a GA. So we're hoping for this to break our record, which was probably between the 10th anniversary and then the Brian Cage, Matt Hardy TLC match back in the day as the biggest wrestling shows we've done here in Vegas. So
absolutely wild. Joe, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Awesome. Great to be on. Joe. Anytime.
Yeah, looking forward to having you again.
I love to talk.
And that was the best part. We had a good conversation. Appreciate it.
We appreciate it, Joe.
Take care.
Take care. The one and only Joe DeFalco from FSW. That was a really fantastic conversation.